He's God's ultimate message to us. He's everything God is. This is who you're thinking about not following any longer. Now we're going to jump clear back toward the end of this book. We're going to go to chapter 12, the next to the last chapter, as the author starts to bring his argument, his desire to persuade these folks back into focus. In Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 to 29. He says to them, "You haven't come to a mountain that can be touched. You haven't come to a mountain burning with fire. You haven't come to darkness, gloom, and storm. You haven't come to a blast from God's trumpet. You haven't come to a voice speaking to you." When people heard that voice long ago, they begged it not to say anything more to them. What God commanded was too much for them. He said, if even an animal touches the mountain, it must be killed with stones. The sight was terrifying. Moses said, "I am trembling with fear." Now, these first few verses 18 to 21 that we just read, these verses refer to Mount Sinai, where Moses received the Ten Commandments. You have not come to a physical mountain as your ancestors did. That's what the author's saying. You have not come to a mountain that can be located on a map. You have not come to a terrifying thing, an event. You have not come to a physical mountain. He goes on in verse 22, he says, "But you have come to Mount Zion. You have come to the city of the living God. This is the heavenly Jerusalem." Now, just pause for a moment. The contrast between the physical aspects of their religious practices and the heavenly source of following Jesus flows all through this book. He constantly talks about, the author refers to the physical aspects of religion and the habits and the rituals as mere shadows of the real heavenly ones provided by Jesus. So what he's saying is, it was awesome that God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai, but you've come to the heavenly mountain, the great mountain, the real thing, not just a shadow of something, not just a representation, but to the real thing. And he goes on, it says, "You have come to a joyful gathering of angels. There are thousands and thousands of them. You have come to the church, to the congregation of God's people. God's first and only Son is over all things. God's people share in what belongs to his Son." He's reminding them of what he said at the very beginning. The Son is the exact representation of God's being. He is the shining presence, a brightness of his glory. He is God's ultimate message to us. He reigns over all things, and as his people, all things belong to us. Everything that is his is ours. He goes on to say that their names, God's people's names, are written in heaven. He says, you have come to God, who is the judge of all people. You have come to the spirits of godly people who have been made perfect. You have come to Jesus. You have come to Jesus. He is the go-between, the mediator of a new covenant. You have come to the sprinkled blood. It promises better things than the blood of Abel. Be sure, here's his argument, be sure you don't say no to the one who speaks. In other words, be sure you don't say no to Jesus, who is God speaking to you. People did not escape when they said no to the one who warned them on earth. And what if we turn away from the one who warns us from heaven? How much less will we escape? If rebelling against the God who showed up at Mount Sinai is dangerous, how much more dangerous is it to rebel against God who shows up in Jesus? That's what he's saying. He says, at that time, when the people met God at Mount Sinai, at that time his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more, I will shake the earth. I will also shake the heavens. The words once more, the author says, the words once more point out that what can be shaken will be taken away. I'm talking about created things. Then what can't be shaken will remain. We are receiving a kingdom that can't be shaken. So then let us be thankful. Then we can worship God in a way that pleases him. Let us worship him with deep respect and wonder. Our God is like a fire that burns everything up. Our God is like a blast furnace in a foundry. That's what that means. So when our world shakes, where can we find unshakable hope? Where can we find something solid to count on and to look forward to and to get us through the day? Did you notice what the writer of the Hebrews said? The author proclaims, we are receiving God's unshakable kingdom right now, right here. So my question is, how are you doing with that? How are you doing with the search for something safe and sound to stand on in these days? Our world has been shaken by a virus. There is no doubt about it. It has been shaken by a virus that no one can resist. And no one understands. The more we hear, the more confusing it gets. Our congregation's schedule of meeting together shifted to online meetings in a matter of days. And I had to learn how to do all this stuff, and frankly, I'm still learning. So temporary things, the things that the author says, the things that can be shaken will fall away, and only the things that cannot be shaken will remain. And so, some temporary things that we thought were important, and they are important, but they're not eternal. They're not essential. Temporary things fell from importance in our eyes, and we've begun to see eternal, essential things more clearly than ever before. We've been reminded that church buildings provide a place for us to gather, but we can't cling to them. They're important. We appreciate the building that God has provided for us to meet in, but it is not essential. I mean, think about it. You're sitting in your living room or watching and participating with a church service without being in a church building. It's important, but it's not essential. There are other things that have been shaken. I used to think, I've often thought that generous churches would be spared what often seems to be an inevitable decline and collapse. And then I watched my family's home church disintegrate. They just quit. Literally. They just decided, we're done. And that church had been one of the top givers to missions, worldwide missions. They've been one of the top givers in our denomination despite only having 120 people in the church. I could not figure it out. Why would God let such a great resource disband? Then as I was interacting with my family members and talking to others, I began to realize the answer. The answer was, they had been shaken, and things fell away because, you see, when you put your faith in what you do for Jesus, instead of putting your faith in Jesus, you have nothing to support you. Things will happen that will keep you from doing things for Jesus. Some of you know this from personal experience. You know that there are things that you used to do physically that you can no longer do. You simply can't. There are things I used to do that I can't do anymore. Each day I'm a little bit older, and some of you know what that means. You see, the things that we do for Jesus are not the issue. The things that we have, like buildings, these are not the issue. Clinging to Jesus is the issue. That's the key. Being on mission with him is what's vital and essential. Being on mission, in other words, doing what Jesus is doing and working with Jesus to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in the people that he's trying to reach. Doing that is what keeps a church vibrant and alive. It is what keeps us vibrant and alive as followers of Jesus. So there are at least two things that I've recognized that are important, but they're not essential. One of those is the idea of a building. A building is important, and I am thankful for it, and I am not advocating getting rid of it. I am simply saying it's not essential.